Well, hello friends and welcome to Ask Zach. Today we are going to talk about what I think is a very underrated string set and sometimes mocked and misunderstood at times. And that's the D'Addario 9.5 through 44 set. And I've been using this gauge off and on for probably 30 years, since the mid-90s. But in the last couple of years, it's really become a mainstay, especially on the tele-type guitars that I play, like this Danocaster. And it's just ended up being kind of the perfect string for me. So I'm going to talk a bit about how I learned about the string set, because it's not, it certainly wasn't common, especially back in the 90s. I was lucky enough to get some information directly from D'Addario, specifically from Jim D'Addario, about why these strings were created in the first place. And yeah, and just talk about some of the, I've had friends that have made fun of the set, and then when I finally got them to try it, they end up getting into it and becoming a believer. So that's what we're going to do today. First off, I want to thank my Patreon members that are what keeps this show going. They are the core, and I'm very grateful for them. And if you'd like to join them in supporting the show, there is a link in the description. All right, one other thing I need to say before I get into the video, and that's that I am a D'Addario artist, and I get discounted strings. I do not get free strings, but I just wanted to make that clear before we dive in. All right, so like many guys, I've kind of waffled between 9s and 10s for my whole playing career. So I started playing guitar in the 1980s, and then in the 1980s, really the most popular set were 9s. Whether it was, Ernie Ball, D'Addario, GHS, whatever, that was the most popular set. And it just had to do with, light gauge strings were popular, strats were popular, you had hair bands and kind of the hard rock thing going on, and a lot of them used 9s. Eddie Van Halen used 9s. Your lone guys that weren't using that maybe were, I don't know, Clapton would use 9s or 10s. And then you had, Steve Ray Vaughan, which of course, we're all familiar with his, heavier string set and tuning down a half step. But really, his whole thing didn't become popular until into the 90s after he was dead. That's when all the imitators came about. But yeah, I used to use 9s and 10s. And then I also used kind of a hybrid set because I was very much into James Burton and Albert Lee. And so I would get a 9 set, and then I would swap out the G string. Instead of using a 16, a lot of times I'd use a 14 or 15, sometimes even down as far as a 12 for a G string when I really wanted to go for that James Burton thing. And I moved to Nashville, and I started really playing a lot, and those strings started feeling really light, and I started doing a lot of recording. And I started realizing that with 9s, I was kind of mashing them down too hard, and I was kind of getting out of tune. And I decided, kind of partially for intonation's sake and just to keep from being ham-fisted and such, I moved up to 10s. But it was such a big leap. And I just wasn't able to do all the things that I'd been doing on 9s, and so I kept kind of going back and forth. This is, through the 90s. And then I was talking with a friend of mine named Scott Johnson that he was friends with guitarist Jeff King, who Jeff King's a great session player here in town, and he also is the band leader for Brooks and Dunn. And he told me, he said, you ought to try these strings. They're D'Addario 9.5. And I'd never heard of such a thing. And frankly, it was like, it sounded ridiculous. And he said, here they are. And he had a set of them. He showed them to me. And I looked at the gauges and everything. And I was like, yeah, this is kind of in between a 9 and a 10 set. But the problem is that especially back in the 90s, this wasn't a easy to find string set. And finally, I found an old shop that's now closed here in Nashville called Guitar Heaven that had them. And so I got a set and tried it, and I really liked it. However, there was this kind of weird attitude toward strings, and I've seen this even up until today, that so many people, when they hear about 9.5s, they'll be like, why don't you just play 9s or 10s? And or you have the guys that are like, be a man and play 10s. Because let's just face it, in the last like 20, 30 years, 10s are really kind of the standard now. That is many times what comes on guitars, and that's many times what most people are playing. Just like back in the 80s, you know, the 9 set was really popular. Well, 10s have been really popular since then. It's just been more popular to use that gauge. But I just kind of kept using it, and then I read this interview in Vintage Guitar magazine with Reggie Young. This was probably in the early 2000s. And in it, he said that he used these D'Addario sets. And he said for a while, he used Fender strings. And he said that Fender made him special strings back in the day that were the same thing as the D'Addario 9 set. And who knows, they might have been made by him. But I actually have a set of these Reggie Young strings here. So this was something that Jenny Young was kind enough to give to me. But this is a real Fender Reggie Young set of 9.5 through 44s. And so Fender, and who knows, these might have been D'Addario strings that were supplied to them, but they never sold these to the public. They just gave these to Reggie for a while, and they said they were going to come out with them, but they never did. So and then of course when they stopped making these for Reggie, he went back to using the D'Addario 9.5s. But that's kind of a fun little side story. But yeah, but Reggie using that gauge kind of helped me feel like, okay, this is not an uncool set, as it were. And I should have just had more confidence in what I was doing. But even to this day, I have people that I tell this string set about that some will just be like, oh, okay, I think I'll go try it. But a lot of them will just still say, be a man, get a set of 10s or whatever. And then I'll get them to try it, and then they'll be like, oh, I get it now. So here's the deal. 9s have always been too light, and 10s have been a little too stiff. And people think, oh, well, they're not that different. But you can really feel the difference. There's a massive difference. I mean, most guys that are 9 set guys don't want to use 10s. They feel like they're too stiff, and most guys that use 10s don't want to use 9s. Be like, I can't play on a set of 9s. So there is a big jump. I mean, your fingers can really tell the difference in, mass and tension and such. So this is a good point to talk about Jim D'Addario's story on these strings. So, of course, just a real brief, D'Addario, started out on their own. Then they started working with Martin in the 60s, early 70s. They had Duco strings, and then they separated out and started J. D'Addario and Company. And it was in the early 70s. And so at some point in the late 70s, the Japanese distributor for D'Addario strings requested a string set that was in the middle of a 9 set and a 10 set. And so that's where the set came from. And so originally it was exclusively sold to Japan, but then they just had them on the shelves there, and they decided to go ahead and launch it to the US also. When they did it, because it was this half size, they decided to make it a series. So in other words, they weren't just launching this one, string set in the half gauges. So they did an 8.5 set, the 9.5 set that, of course, started it, originally. Then you had a 10.5 set. And so they launched that in the 1980s to the, to the masses, to the public in the U.S. And the string set, kind of caught on. And Jim said in the email that he sent to me through their artist rep that Joe Satriani was actually going to endorse this set, and then it kind of, as things went along, he decided to switch to just using the regular 9 through 42 set, and so of course that ended up being their most popular string set throughout the 80s, which of course I'm sure for every string company the 9 through 42 set was the most popular. But yeah, so D'Addario started making this set all because of a Japanese distributor, and they specifically wanted one that the tension was in between a 9 set and a 10 set, and so that's what they came up with. I think the set is really the perfect in between. It's the perfect compromise, because to me, always 9 sets are always kind of too loose and light, and so one of the things that happens for me sometimes, for some of you that have been watching the show for a while, you know that I have arthritis in this joint here in my left hand, my fretting hand. And most of the time it's fantastic, but sometimes if I don't play for a couple of days, like if I go on vacation or something like that, or if I overplay, if I play too much, if I just have something where I'm just killing myself with too heavy strings or whatever, my hand will get really sore. So at times, there was a recent run that, in fact, this last weekend, I was playing with my buddy Paul Bogart in Tulsa, and my hand was really feeling sore. And so I put on a set of 9s. In fact, this is another one of these kind of hybrid sets that D'Addario makes, but this one's called Balanced Tension. And so it's 9 through 40, and it's like 9, 12, 15, 22, 30, 40. And that's pretty light. But so I put this set on one guitar, and then I put a regular set of 9.5s on my other telly. And so I took 2 tellies with me. Usually I take a telly and a strap, but I took 2 tellies. And so that way I was able to start off with the first show just playing the 9 through 40 guitar. And I was able to kind of get my hands kind of back in shape after the first night, and then I switched over. And so one of the things I noticed, and this is something I don't like about a 9 set, is that you have to bend the strings further. So I'm talking about the physical distance. So it's like when you bend, like even a 9.5 set or a 10 set, when you bend something a whole step, it's less distance than what you have to do with a 9 set. And so that's something that's always been frustrating for me, because I don't really mind a 9 set otherwise, but what I don't like is how far I have to bend the string. And it's not like it's that hard, but it's just, you run more up against the other strings. And so to me, again, the 9.5 set is just kind of the perfect, kind of compromise between 9s and 10s. Also, it just has a fat sound. To me, it sounds a little bigger than a 9 set. It always feels good. It feels natural under my hand. I have no complaints and love it a whole lot. So, yeah. I guess I need to thank Andy Pitcher, who is the artist rep for D'Addario, and also, of course, Jim D'Addario for digging up some history of the company. I just love this set. It's been a godsend to me, and one that I use all the time. Just a brief gear thing. I always put the gear that I use in the description of the video, but just in case you're wondering, this is a Danocaster guitar, and I'm using a Mirage compressor, and then I have a Headstrong Lil King amp, and that's all that I'm running through today. And yeah, I hope you'll try out a set of the 9.5s. There are options. So this is the regular 9.5 set that, of course, they've been making since, I guess, the late 70s, early 80s. And, they're around $4 or $5, depending on if you buy just one set or multiples. And then I use the NYXL version, which this is a lot more expensive. These are, $12 a set. Now again, I have a discount through D'Addario because I'm an artist with them, but to me, these are very worthwhile to purchase over the other ones, because for me, these last a lot longer. I can play, you know, 3 or 4 shows on these, and they stretch in very quickly. I'm just talking about the NYXLs in general. They stretch in very quickly, and then they stay in tune. I have to do less touch up of the tuning throughout the night. And so these are, these are wonderful. And so, you know, I'll usually string up my guitars, you know, before I go on a 3 or 4 show run, and you know, with the 9.5s, and sometimes I'll use the 10s, like on certain guitars where they just feel looser anyway. Like I have a Strat that a lot of times I'll put the NYXL 10s, but on the Teles I put these, and I'll put a set on there, and then I'll have a backup set with me in case one pops or something like that. But I haven't had one pop so far. Should knock on wood. This is made of wood, right? Yeah. Yeah, I love these strings, love the NYXL. This is the perfect set for me. And you ought to go try them out, because there is a big difference between a set of 9s and a set of 10s. And these have a really good feel to them. They sound great. They stay in tune well, and I'm grateful. All right, guys. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.